Good evening and welcome everybody. We are honored to have here with us Dr. Susan Overhauser from the United States. Susan, with your permission, I will switch to Hebrew and introduce you, okay? היום הוא יום הזיכרון לשואה, ואנחנו בתוך שואה משלנו, מאז 7 באוקטובר. האם מאחורי האירועים האלו עדיין פועלות ישויות רוחיות? ואיך נוכל להקשיב לקריאה להתעורר, בזמן שאנו מקדישים המון מהכוח להתמודדות נפשית עם האירועים? במפגש הערב תבחן סוזן את ההשפעות הרוחניות מאחורי המשבר הנוכחי במזרח התיכון, וכיצד נוכל להיות פעילים בקידום הריפוי וביצירת הטוב. דוקטור סוזן אוברהאוזר היא פסיכולוגית קלינית מומחית, חברת סגל באיגוד הצפון אמריקאי לפסיכולוגיה אנתרופוסופית מטעם AAP, ופעילה בקידום הפסיכותרפיה האנתרופוסופית ברמה בינלאומית. היא מחויבת מאוד לעזור למיסטריות החדשות, למצוא כניסה לעולם המודרני ולהוות כוח חיובי לשינוי חברתי. Susan, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you so much. I'm honored to be invited to have the opportunity to speak to you. All my many Israeli and Jewish friends, you and those around the world, on this day of remembrance and remembering, I'd like to take us on a bit of a journey, some remembering, some looking towards the future, and also really trying to sense into what is happening now in our times, what we're all living through, what you are living through, which is such an intense thing. So earlier today, many of you may have heard the sirens giving the call to remember those we have lost, and in particular, remembering the Holocaust, remembering the deaths of over 6 million Jewish people, over 17 million people overall in the Nazi extermination camps and the genocide. Today, we remember the lives, the sacrifices of all of these people. Many of them, those who died in the gas chambers, died even of cyanide poisoning, which is a particularly difficult form of dying that kind of tears into the soul. It's an attempt at soul murder. There was an attempt on the part of the Nazi regime to exterminate a whole people, to commit genocide, an impulse to eliminate a whole race so that a whole people would have no home on earth. Many people had to flee to try to escape, those that were able. And ever since then, there has been this quality of a number of Jewish peoples around the world and the diaspora, in a way, as a kind of homeless souls wandering the earth, and the desire for a home. And a home was able to come about in a way and was founded, and some of you are lucky enough to live in a home, but it's small. It's not so easy to protect. And of course, it's been in the middle of so much conflict. But this quality of being a homeless soul is also part of a path of initiation. One finds oneself homeless away on this earth, and then the task becomes to build a spiritual hut to build a spiritual home that you can then begin to work from. And so one can think of the whole people, of the Jewish people, of all the tribes, of all the related groups. There's such a long history going through the ages of striving and of connection with Archangel Michael. And there have been so many sacrificial offerings of the Jewish people throughout history. The Jewish people had the task to prepare the physical vehicle that then Jesus Christ could incarnate into. So the careful buildup of the whole line of heredity to create a body capable of allowing the incarnation of a Messiah. And then the sacrifice that we celebrate in the day that ends upon this evening. The sacrifices during the Holocaust. So many deaths. So many people dying before their time, really for no reason, for no logical, sensible reason. And with all these deaths, all of a sudden, that's a particular kind of happening from the point of view of the spiritual world. That so many die suddenly, not due to their own personal karma, but for quite other factors. And if we remember at the time of the Holocaust, this was not long after the etheric Christ began to be perceptible to human beings. So the etheric crucifixion had happened earlier due to the materialism and the darkness of human soul, the dark thoughts that were floating up. And the darkest of those thoughts were those of Nazism that wanted to exterminate all kinds of peoples and advance only one, a kind of egoism of a nation, of a people. And in the midst of this process, those evil forces created this innumerable deaths. And one has to wonder what happened to all those forces. When people die before their time, there are incredible etheric forces released. Etheric forces that were not used up during the lifetime. Extra, you might say, unused etheric forces. And they float up and become available in the spiritual world. And on the one hand, these forces can be captured by the evil parties at the moment of the murder, at the moment of the killings. But on the other hand, they can also be utilized by the good, by the forces of the good, by the angels. And these freed extra etheric forces help sustain morality on earth and a feeling of religiosity, a feeling of faith and hope. So there is a way in which you could think of all the sacrifices that happened in the Holocaust. What if those forces were in fact those forces that helped sustain and enlarge the etheric vehicle of the etheric Christ? Was this perhaps also part of the sacrificial mission of the Jewish people? Having this opportunity then to offer up aspects of their etheric nature, which is connected to the nature of the archangel and the people, offering this up when needed for humanity. And then, of course, all the anti-Semitic forces didn't end with World War II, unfortunately. It's an ongoing problem. So, as you are all quite well aware, You know, the Jewish people face scorn and derision right and left all over the earth. There's racism, anti-Semitism. There's this quality where people feel it's like it's okay to put down the Jewish people, to send hatred in particular to the Jewish people. So this gives the Jewish people a task in a way of having to digest all of this hatred, this undeserved hatred that humanity seems to be sending its way, to find how to stand tall in the heat of all this conflict and keep one's ego upright in the middle of so much strife and conflict. There's a way in which this is a kind of parallel of the crown of thorns, all these pricks that come from every side and having to stand tall. So standing tall as all you are in this crucible of the Holy Land, receiving attacks from every side, while being a nation small in number, not so easy to defend, and becoming the focus for many of the anti-social forces of humanity. So humanity as a whole is really working to develop, its ego, to develop its I. And all these anti-social forces are involved in that development of the I. And there's a way in which the Jewish people take some of the brunt of those anti-social forces in these times. So we're talking about astral suffering, astral attacks, hatred, rejection, derision, like so many astral spears being thrown your way. It's not just a physical warfare. It's also a spiritual warfare. And it takes courage to stand in the midst of all of this. It takes great courage. So we ask, Michael, please be at my side. Please help, give me strength. It took courage to escape the slavery in Egypt. It took courage to hide in Germany and to steal away in the middle of the night to try to escape with one's life in one's hands. It takes courage to be an Israeli citizen right now. What kind of spiritual warrior are you? Is your weapon the sword? Or is your weapon the sword of the Spirit word? Are you putting on the armor of God, the Prince of Peace? So we'll take a step back again at the larger picture. So humans are on Earth evolving their I, striving someday in some future part of evolution to become more like angels. Well, it's not just humanity in a process of evolution, but all of the hierarchies are in a process of evolution. Michael, we know, recently transitioned from being an archangel to being an archai. Michael is now for all of humanity, for the whole earth. And the archangels, who typically guide a people, a language, a cultural group, they are also on a path of development, and they are seeking to gain more and more the capacities of an archai. And this is happening in our times. Are we awake to it? So what does this mean? In the past, the spirit of a folk you know, very much connected to language, to culture, to music, to dance, but also to geographical place, to a spot on the earth, to a land. But now, as archangels are trying to transition to grow, just as in our own meditations, you know, we go inwards and we seek in a certain way to become free of our physical body. In our meditations, we learn to become free of our physical body and live more in the spirit. So too, the archangels are now seeking to learn to become free of a specific geographic location on planet Earth. So they're seeking a certain freedom from the earth element, from the body of the earth. And we, of course, see this in the Jewish people. There's a great diaspora, right? The number of Jews outside Israel is greater than the number inside. And so this is already happening. So a people, a group can begin to work globally, not just in a specific geographic region. And there are a lot of implications of this for all nations. And we're beginning to see this kind of chafing against national boundaries around the world. And there are many layers to this. So there's the kind of loosening up of the geographical location as being most important, just as in humanity, the racial piece is becoming less important. And the kind of body itself is becoming a little bit less important in that sense. But there is also a real importance to the center, if you will, the heart, the middle. And this is where you live. You know, what's the heart of the matter? You live in near the Holy Land. It's a very holy place on earth. A very holy place on earth. It's a place where there is a certain access to the life forces of the earth as a whole. As you know, it's a holy place for many religions. It's recognized by many groups. If we go back to the story of paradise, of Eden, and the 4 rivers that flowed from Eden, the Hiddekel, if I'm saying it correctly, the Tigris, flowing through the greater Middle East, through Turkey, Assyria, out to the Persian Gulf. That's, you know, that ancient Babylon civilization flowed through there as well, many cultures. The Prat, the Euphrates, which defines the border of the promised land. This is the land of milk and honey. The promised land, the fertile crescent, the cradle of all these ancient civilizations. It's a very special place. But let's not let the ego get too puffed up by this gift of living in this very special place. With the gifts also comes a responsibility. And as you know, as your culture and religions tell you, there's a mission there to prepare the ground for the Messiah. And one could argue a task also to recognize him, to awaken, to notice, to see, to discern. And one can have various thoughts and feelings about, well, did we recognize? Did we not recognize? Do we recognize? But there's also a mission in this not recognizing. The whole tension that exists within this not recognizing, that whole tension field also prepares for the recognition of the false Messiah as false. For the time of a false Messiah is also coming. And we need those who can recognize when it's not the Messiah. This is all a call to awaken. a call to wake up, to be spiritually aware and awake. Now, the Holy Land, of course, was a place for a drama, a necessary tragedy of humankind. It's the place of the drama of the Passion of Christ, where Christ received the derision of the peoples. And the blood of Christ went into the earth at Golgotha. The I am of humanity, the blood that could carry the I am of humanity as universal humanity, entered the earth in your part of the globe. And from that moment, out of that particular point in the globe, a spiritual light began to shine out from the earth, a spiritual light visible from the cosmos. It didn't happen anywhere else on the earth. It happened very close to where you are. And there are forces that want to attack that light and lead us deeper into a kind of sub-materialism. And it's not just through this war, but through many wars and all over the earth that this whole attack is happening. There's a whole network of geopolitical machinations around the earth. There's a whole web of dark power. And in fact, the dark web helps in a way to support all of that activity. There's these machinations behind the scenes. So on the one hand, to work against this globally, the nations must gradually learn to let go of particularly identified land borders and to begin to be more permeable between place and people as a part of allowing this development of the archangels, because they can only develop if we develop with them. And we see this around the world, and particularly here in America, where all the races mingle, all the religions mingle, all the cultures mingle. And that doesn't mean that all these need to go away. We need the cultures to remain, to be held and maintained, because they have important pieces, each of them, for us for the future. But right now, Israel and the attacks of Hamas and the attacks of the Hezbollah and the attacks of Iran, terrible atrocities from October 7th and beyond. Terrible, as never seen before by the world, live streamed. Incredible sexual abuse, heinous violence, and this live stream, watching individual human beings relishing in evil, relishing in murder and killing and rape, as never seen before by so many. What is this now? These are mighty Asuric attacks. There's a mighty release of Asuric activity that's being orchestrated by the Black Lodges and the Black magicians of the globe. They have a very special interest in the geopolitical center of the Holy Land. It's, as you know, the Middle East is a tension point between East and West and North and South, a tension point in that whole part of the world. And it's a possibility of a kind of explosion that can happen there. The tension is so high. It's a power center of the earth where this light shines forth, and there's a desire to dim down that light and make Earth evolution go on a totally different course. And along with this process, we need to be aware that the deeper levels of the evil layers of the earth are opening up. So the fragmenter layer of the earth is now opening. And we see this in this torture. Torture is a kind of soul murder, an attempt to murder the soul. And these Black Lodges have been involved and are involved. They like to stir up these astral forces in various different ways, and then they want to capture and utilize those forces and capture and utilize the etheric forces that are released in the act of murder. Now, these soldiers of the Black Brotherhoods, they lurk everywhere. They are in every government, in every political faction. So we can neither condemn nor uphold any particular group's full agenda, because there are hidden actors at work, invisibly, behind the outer facades. And these are forces aligned with black magic. These are forces aligned with the sun demon, a being from outside our whole cosmic evolution that wants to disturb and redirect the whole course of Earth evolution. So much is at stake here. In terms of the layers of the Earth, there's the Earth mirror or the Earth reflector. That level of the Earth has already been opened, and that's a kind of reversal happens where everything is reversed into its opposite. So good is easily turned to evil. Even Anthroposophy can be turned into dogma if we don't put new life into it. But now this 8th layer of the Earth is beginning to open. And that's the fragmenter, the shatterer. And this part of the Earth multiplies everything, but devoid of morality. It's a kind of like a replicator of things kind of incessantly, but without any morality, without any meaning, without any true purpose. And this is the part of the Earth where all strife and disharmony have their source, where all evil is prepared here in that 8th level. And there's this attempt here in all that's happening in the Middle East to kind of tap into that layer of the Earth and just allow it to burst forth and explode. And the only way to overcome this is for human beings to learn to work in harmony with each other, in harmony. So, I mean, evil exists so that we can create harmony out of ourselves. It's our task as human beings to begin to learn how to create harmony with each other. But for the dark forces who are seeking more and more access to this 8th layer of the Earth, down even to the 9th layer of the Earth, where there's this core of egoism, you know, the very source of all black magic even. This is part of their long-term aim in the conflicts that you're experiencing right now. I mean, you're sitting on a boiling cauldron that has the potential to burst into a 3rd World War. And the whole world is very aware of this. And we're all watching with bated breath. What will happen? The tensions are high. This is a call to awaken. You know, the Middle East as a whole, I think one can argue, doesn't quite have enough spiritual weaving together to really prevent such an outcome. There needs to be more co-working among the different ethnic, language, and religious groups. And of course, many of you have been working on this for decades. But it's this conscious community working out of love and compassion and gentleness, recognizing the humanity of the other from wherever they might come. That is what is needed. Only that can help bring peace. So what to do? What is the task now for us? Of course, these ongoing efforts for peace must continue. That's self-understood. And of course, we do all that we can that we don't succumb to genocide or mere revenge and retaliation. So what is the larger question being asked of us, the larger task? What is being called for is a purification of the astral. and even the development of what could be called the astral skin that actually allows the higher I to come in and to find its true home within the human being, allowing the higher I to find its true home. Let's not get lost in our earthly I finding its true home. Let's make place for the higher I also to find its true home. And it can only find its true home without egotism, even in its forms of nationalism or religious superiority, but also without weak ego forces. So not a mere helpless succumbing to events. That's not what's called for either. One needs a strong ego that can then become selfless, that can be upright in the face of all of these attacks, and that can begin to transform all of these wounds. These are in some ways old wounds, and they're new wounds. They're remembered wounds. Are the Jewish people as a people remembering the wounding of Christ? Well, let's go back to what can we do? So there's great concern, of course, for the torture victims and the hostages that remain in unknown situations. What can we do for them? Well, they're experiencing most likely various forms of torture, mind control, forms of abuse, and these are all attacks on the I. This involves a Asuric attack on the I. And whenever there's an attack on the I, it requires more than one human being to help. So we can take the archetype in the old initiation rites. In the old initiation rites, the I of the initiate was at risk in the temple sleep. Well, the I was the I and the astral body were lifted out of the physical body prematurely, and it took 12 hierophants to contain the I of that initiate so they could go through the process and return back to their bodies safely. It took 12 to help one. And so I invite you to consider that it now takes 12 human beings to hold and carry and love each individual who is currently experiencing Asuric attacks. So this is an invitation. Can you find 12 to meditatively hold each hostage that you believe is still alive? And this kind of meditative holding you might be familiar with as a psychotherapist or as a Waldorf teacher. You know, seeing the best in that individual, seeing their soul in the best light, and bringing them light and hope and a kind of containment. So not thinking about them and their suffering, but sending them the forces of strength and the good. And of course, it's not just the hostages that are suffering, but many, many people are suffering. And let's not forget the power of witnessing, the power and strength of witnessing, to be truly seen in one's pain. It has meaning to not just go through the pain and suffering, but to share it with another soul and be truly seen and heard. So this intimate taking in of the stories of all those who have been hurt, all those who have been tortured, the stories of all of the refugees going from place to place without a home once again. And this holding in the soul, if one can help hold the suffering of another, it can allow that wisdom to ripen. And that soul can then begin to ray and even begin to kind of hold and contain all that happened to that individual. This requires courage. Once again, courage to be able to go into the depths of what has happened, because it's not pretty, right? To go into the depths. These people need to not be so alone in those desolate places where one has to face the abyss of nothingness. Total darkness, don't know what to do, no resources, can't see here or there, there's no light, I don't know what to do, I might live, I might die. To be in that place of abyss. And it's a scary place. It's a hard place for most human beings to go. But it's also, in a certain way, necessary for our times, because only if we can face this abyss of nothingness can we actually cross the threshold to spirit. It's a necessary step. And your people are being asked to take this step as a people. So only when you go into this abyss of nothingness does one get to this place where, out of sheer faith and hope, one can find somehow out of nothing the force to kind of do a complete turn around, where one can then create out of nothingness, out of no forces, out of no even sense experience often, to build the capacity to truly create spiritually. And it, of course, takes great courage to be in that place and to find one's way through the eye of the needle. But this is where spiritual strength, spiritual power, spiritual force is created. This is where one can really develop true hope, true faith, and true love. And when one has found these, one can find one's path, one's way to find the direction that will help for the good. One can also connect with the dead. So attention to and caring for the dead in ritual, in memory, in a positive holding of their transitions. Once again, holding all that was beautiful and glorious of their being, but also this care that the etheric forces that were released by all the dead, that these etheric forces can find their way to weave into the moral strengthening of humanity and not be usurped by the evil forces. So the more that each of us meditates and tries to make sure that these etheric forces find their way to the good, that keeps them from being grasped by these evil forces. And of course, in order to even do this, it's really important to not be captivated or caught or stuck on the horrific ways in which these people died. At some point, that has to be set aside in order that you can turn the forces to the good, because the strengthening of that path to the good is what the dead need from us, this strengthening of the path towards the light. So these are some things that one can do as a group or collectively, but also really it begins with individual work, individual spiritual work, transformation of your own astral body. We each have the capacity for evil within ourselves. Everyone, every human being does. Can we see it? Do we know it? Can we admit it? Can we really look at it face on? Can we notice when we start to have some us-them feeling? Can we notice when we start to engage in hatred? We all have the capacity to be murderers. These forces are actually within our very metabolic system. And we have to just be awake to our capacity for evil. It goes hand in hand with our capacity for freedom. So we have to rout out all fear, all hatred, and all doubt, and work bit by bit at developing what can be called an astral skin or an astral etheric skin, which helps the higher I to really settle within us. Can we strengthen the stream of love and compassion towards others in all parties of this conflict? And can we ourselves connect to positive spiritual beings, to Michael, to Christ, to those beings that we personally find strengthening? I spoke earlier about the etheric Christ and the crucifixion of the etheric Christ, which happened before the World Wars. Well, are we awake to what's happening now? After the etheric crucifixion, is there not a kind of etheric resurrection? Are we awake to this? There are new forces. There are Christianized elemental beings. There are strengthening forces for the good that are available and growing in the etheric world, the spiritual world closest to the earth. Are we awake? I was really struck by the timing of Easter this year, with the eclipses and the earthquakes and the lining of the stars. All of this had a kind of remembrance to over 2,000 years ago, the time of the mystery of Golgotha. There's a kind of remembering that's happening right now. And we are this week in the week of Ascension. Are we aware or awake to the qualities of the risen etheric Christ? Can we connect to these new moral ethers that are becoming available to humanity? These moral ethers, we can think of a higher form of empathy, truth, harmony, and a kind of goodness, the good, which also includes a sense of meaning where everything then makes sense in the context of the whole. So it's possible even that some of the people who went through those experiences at the mystery of Golgotha are on earth again once more, and maybe even some in the Holy Land. We can remember the rising of Lazarus as the first public Christian initiation. Awaken. Come forth. Awaken. Stand upright. Be active in the world with a new life given to you, with new tasks. So these wars that we're in the midst of, all this conflict that we're in the midst of on earth, it's turning our eyes away from the advent of the rising, if you will, of the etheric Christ. It's pulling our attention away of what's actually happening. And this is, of course, is part of the goal of the Black Lodges, to turn our eyes away, that we stop our spiritual striving, that we just go down to our earthly humanity. But the time of blood sacrifice is over. I think humanity knows this on an intellectual level, but we're still learning to know it on the level of feeling. So the Black Lodges, they try to achieve some of their greatest power through human murder and capturing these forces that are released through this evil activity. And like I mentioned, the Jewish people have had a role sacrificing, in a sense, in terms of Christ Jesus, in terms of the etheric Christ, and now in terms of the sense of home. There's a bit of a troubled heart center right now. But just as the spirit people must learn to set aside their own physical body to achieve to pure spiritual experience, so too do modern peoples of various nations in the world need to become willing to set aside some of their own geopolitical boundaries for the sake of the living flow of peoples around the earth, for a strengthened circulation of a true human being. You know, there's a heart center and a circulation into the periphery, and this circulation needs to become easier and less clogged, right? So it's a difficult time. It's a heart aching time. It's a very difficult time and period to go through. And we must call on Christ and all his helpers and all the spiritual beings we hold dear. And if we can, we try to work in as Manichaean a way as possible. That is to love the evil good, to offer compassion, even to offer trust even when the trust isn't earned. You know, learning to love one another and to work against all hatred and splitting. Remembering that good things are also happening in the spiritual world, and there are beings very much willing and able to help us, but they need human beings. They need human beings to be that link. And those human beings are us. And we have been given this gift of anthroposophy, this larger view of way of seeing things. And with every gift comes a responsibility. We must do our meditations. We must work together in community. You know, the new mysteries are incarnating on earth right now in a much deeper way. It's like a third call of Michael. The Michaelic will now must flow into deeds, not just thinking about spiritual reality or having feelings and ennobled feelings, but now we are asked to actually act, to do in the world. And of course, we need that courage to stay awake, to not be distracted by all the things that would pull our attention away from our true tasks. The mystery dramas show us if we're awake to Ahriman, he loses his power. As soon as we're awake to the evil that's happening, it loses our power on us. So awakeness to what you are going through, to these Asuric attacks, will lessen their power. Don't underestimate the power of your spiritual work. Be aware within yourself, be vigilant. When any us-them thoughts arise, when any hatreds arise, or a desire for revenge and retaliation. Instead, we need to develop the spiritual courage to defend the good, to send spiritual light forth, light that seeks to shine from that whole region of the world and is shining, and light that can banish the darkness. And this is something that we must do at first individually and then together communally. We're being asked, all of us are being asked, all of us around the world are being asked to offer up something from our astral body, to purify our astral body, to purify the remnants of our doubt, of our fear, and our hatred. And of course, you know, the Israeli people have been very well schooled in this, you know, working against the fear of death. For how many decades have you lived with that at your side? It's a special occult schooling. And we can also serve to develop compassion for the striving of our neighbors. to banish the doubt of spirit, and to try to unite together in spiritual brotherhood. And I know in a way it's a big ask to try to rout out hatred when you're being bombed, when you hear the sirens on a daily basis. And, you know, the bombs are coming in your direction, and your friends and your families are hurt. And there are so many refugees, and there's so much suffering and pain. Are you being asked in a certain way to suffer the wounds of Christ in a geopolitical way? Are you being asked as a people to experience the astral suffering of the etheric Christ? I'm reminded of the 7 wounds of Christ, the blood, but also the blood and the water falling from the side of Christ. That water that contains the elixir of life that can be found when we achieve union with the etheric Christ. And this brings new forces that sustain us, new forces that bring us together, that help us achieve our common humanity, our connection in love with other human beings. And that means setting aside the role of a victim, as Christ did, and making a sacrificial offering, taking on part of the karma of humanity. We're being asked to set aside sympathy and antipathy, to learn to rise above. Can we rise above to what is universally human, to true empathy? Empathy that can extend when we strengthen it, even to empathy for the perpetrator who's lost their way. And empathy for all around you that are going through all of this now. So you are asked nothing less than to experience the suffering of the wounding, of the hatred of humanity, focused on a particular people and a particular geographic region of the earth. It's not an easy task. But wisdom is crystallized pain. The creation of wisdom comes through the transmutation of pain. So it's all up to a particular way of handling the pain that you're going through, that a ripening of wisdom can come about. And let's not pretend that this is going to be easy. I mean, the whole world is watching. And there are movements all over the world with, you know, all kinds of opinions throwing this way and that, and all kinds of accusations. And you have to somehow stand up right and stand for the truth and for what is good and what is harmonious in the midst of all of this circling of strife and accusations and conflict and hatred. But we are gifted with insights and also practices through Anthroposophy that can help. And we are called on to use these. We can remember that the spirit of every human being is indestructible. The spirit is indestructible. Death is a birth in spirit. So while we can be sad at all the deaths from an earthly perspective, there's also a celebration of birth in the spiritual world. And the dead can be encouraged to join their forces with the forces of good that strengthen faith, that strengthen religious feeling, that strengthen hope, that strengthen the forces for the good, for moral forces on earth. So what's essential? To connect to our essence, to connect to our true core spirit, to our higher self. to connect to our ideals, to what is good, not focusing too much on the horror or the fear, but learning to overcome the fear and instead to take action towards the good, towards healing, compassion. And a most essential element is working with our own evil, working with our own selfish tendencies, and gently rooting these out, transmuting them, learning to express and experience compassion for all souls, all beings that are suffering in this whole process. We must try to find and develop and strengthen that inner peace that we can come to through meditation and spiritual work. And it's out of this inner peace that we can then begin to learn to create social harmony. And when we do this, it helps our archangel as well to grow. On this, the life of our whole globe depends. The tasks are soul size. Will we awake? I'd like to end with reading two different things. One is a short excerpt from A Sleep of Prisoners by Christopher Fry, a drama. The human heart can go the length of God. Dark and cold we may be, but this is no winter now. The frozen misery of centuries breaks, cracks, begins to move. The thunder is the thunder of the flows, the thaw, the flood, the upstart spring. Thank God our time is now, when wrong comes up to face us everywhere, never to leave us till we take the longest stride of soul we ever took. Affairs are now soul size. The enterprise is exploration into God. Where are you making for? It takes so many thousands years to wake. But will you wake for pity's sake? And the next is something I referred to at the beginning, which has to do with, on the one hand, our protection in these times and how do we find our way to move forward. And this has to do with what's called the armor of God, which is in, I want to say the letter to the Ephesians. It's in the New Testament. So I'll read this excerpt about the armor of God. What it comes to in the end is this: let the intense strength of his might flow through those who want to serve the Lord. Put on the full armor of God, that you may resist the well-aimed attacks of the adversary. For our part is not to fight against powers of flesh and blood, but against spirit beings, mighty in the stream of time, against spirit beings, powerful in the molding of Earth's substance, against the cosmic powers whose darkness rules the present time, against beings who in the spiritual worlds are themselves the powers of evil. Therefore, courageously take up the armor of God, that you can resist the evil on the day when it unfolds the greatest strength. You should stand firm, following everything through to the very end. Stand fast, girded about the loins with truth. Put on the breastplate of the higher life, which fulfills our human destiny. Shoe your feet with preparedness to spread the message of peace that comes from the angels. In all your deeds, continually hold to your heart's vision of Christ's presence, with which you can quench all the flaming darts of the evil one. Take into your thoughts the certainty of the coming world healing, that it protect you as with a helmet, and grasp the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, which you utter. May this armor cover you in all your supplications and prayers. May your inmost heart light up in spirit in your prayers. To this end, direct your spirit's strength in all your efforts of soul and in your intercessions for all who would know Christ's healing power.
Wow. Yeah, I think we are all overwhelmed. So if someone wants to ask something or to add something. Thank you so much, Susan. Nice. It was so inspiring. Thank you for reminding us that we need the courage to be awake, and reminding us our karma. Yeah. Here in Israel, this is our pre-incarnation decision, to be born here. And you remind us to wake up to our work, and you did it with a lot of love and reverence. And thank you so much for that.
Well, you're very welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Suzanne. Good to hear you.
Good
And
to
it
hear
was
you.
really wonderful.
Oh, thank you, Leora.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Daniela. I just hope these words give some strength to help go through the times, to help find some directions. Sometimes we just have to remember and find our way again. It's so easy to get caught up in the storms of what's happening and to lose our thread of connection to spirit. And that thread is so important, not just for each one of us, but for all your neighbors, all your friends, all your family.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miriam.
I think you need the courage to speak to us the way you spoke. I think you need to love humanity and the karma of the Jewish people in order to speak the way you spoke. And I want to thank you for that, for being a true companion, friendship to our karma. And there's a lot to be said about the joint karma of United States and Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you know about it even more, but that's for a future lecture.
Mm.
But I could feel it, that we are together. Thank you.
Mm. Well, and I have a very close connection, personally, to Judaism and to Jewish people. My husband was Jewish, and we celebrated multiple holidays always, and many, many Jewish friends and connection. So it's important, and there's a particular way in which there's been a striving for centuries even, to bring these streams together in a mutual fructification. And so whatever I can do to help in that way, I'm just so happy to be able to offer it.
Thank you so much.
Mm.
Yeah. מישהו רוצה עוד לשאול שאלה? זה יכול להיות בעברית, או נתרגם, להגיד משהו.
I would like to say, first of all, thanks a lot. And it was really inspiring. And I feel that I have a lot of work personally, because I'm just being, I missed the word, being held back by all the action around, all that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to meditate and think about the captured one. I tried to choose one, and then I said, and why this one? Why not the other one? And then everyone is coming to me and haunted me. It's like I can't hold it, so it just blew out because of that. I can't hold it. It's too much.
It is too much to hold as an individual. That's why one needs to form groups. This is a call. If there are enough of you that you each want to form groups of 12, and each group of 12 to focus on one particular soul, that will really be of immense help. And then Anna, you might experience that it's something you can handle, that it's not too much. If you're part of a group helping one soul and knowing that there are others helping the other souls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the greatest idea. Yeah. which I forget, of course. It's like the things you have and you lose. Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm. Mm.
So thank you, Susan, for your time and for your love and big heart.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yes.
everybody, to be
Yeah.
with us.
Thank
Have a
you.
good
You're so welcome, and my love goes out to all of you. It's not easy to be where you are in these times.
We can feel it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and good night to all.